It was my 68th birthday. There was no cake, no candles, no I love you, Mom, just my son, holding the car door open outside Rosewood Nursing Center, and saying, with a stiff smile, "This is what's best for everyone." He didn't meet my eyes. He had a flight to catch, and apparently, no time for guilt. I watched the taillights disappear down the hill. That's when I realized this wasn't temporary. This wasn't a rest and recover situation. This was an exile, dressed up as a favor. The staff welcomed me gently. They thought I'd been having episodes. That's what he told them. A nice room, a bed with rails, and a nurse who whispered like I was broken. I wasn't broken. I was furious. But I said nothing. Instead, I smiled. I ate the bland dinner. I watched Wheel of Fortune with people who didn't know my name. And that night, as I lay staring at the ceiling in a place I never agreed to live, I made a promise. I would not fade quietly. They thought they'd buried me on my birthday. But life, it turns out, had one last twist. And I was just 1 week away from turning everything around. Let me tell you a little about the woman he left behind. My name is Helen Rose Carter. I was born in Missouri, raised 3 boys on one salary, and never once missed a single school play, dentist appointment, or scraped knee emergency. I was what they call a quiet backbone. The mom who packs lunches at 5 a.m., clips coupons, and somehow always shows up with the right Band-Aid in her purse. My husband passed away when our youngest, Ethan, was just 12. There was no life insurance, no savings cushion, so I went to work, cleaning at the very same kind of nursing home he would later abandon me in. I pushed carts, emptied bedpans, and whispered comfort to patients whose families stopped visiting, all while raising my sons with everything I had left. I did it for Ethan. He was the sweet one, the one who cried when he lost his first tooth, who used to hold my hand all the way through the parking lot until he was 10. And when he got into Georgetown, I sold my wedding ring to pay his deposit. No regrets. That's just what mothers do. For a while, he remembered. Sunday calls, holiday cards. He even surprised me one Christmas with a snow globe that said, "To the best mom in the world." Then he met Claire. Claire, the kind of woman who said things like, "We're manifesting abundance this year," and called everyone babe. She wore designer sneakers to Thanksgiving, and once asked if we had a vegan option at my potluck chili dinner. She hugged me tightly, but never looked me in the eyes. After they got married, things changed. Phone calls became texts. Texts became silence. She'd cancel lunch plans last minute with a smiley face. Said my chicken salad was a little heavy for their digestion. One time, I brought over a casserole unannounced. She opened the door just a crack, said Ethan was busy resting, and took the dish like it was a bag of trash. A few weeks later, Ethan sat me down. He said, "Mom, we found this beautiful facility. You'll have your own space, and they have bingo nights." It wasn't a conversation. It was a decision. They'd already signed the papers, already packed my bags. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded, folded my hands, and thanked them for thinking of me. I remember the ride. Claire was in the front seat, giving Ethan directions. I sat in the back with my purse clenched in my lap, like a child waiting for time out to begin. They dropped me off at Rosewood Nursing Center on my birthday. No cake, no hug, just a rushed "take care, Mom" before the car door shut. I stood on the curb as they drove away. The nurse beside me held my arm like I might fall. But I wasn't falling. I was freezing. Not from the weather, but from something deeper. A kind of betrayal that makes your bones ache. What I didn't know then, what I would learn in that quiet little room, was that the son I raised had become a man I didn't recognize. But here's the thing about forgetting who you are. Sometimes all it takes is one tiny spark to remember. And that spark? It was folded inside a drawer, waiting for the right night. It started with silence, the kind that doesn't echo, just presses in from all sides, like thick fog in the lungs, like grief that's too quiet to scream. The nurse showed me to my room. Private, she said. A small blessing, I suppose. One window, one bed, a dresser, beige curtains, and a chair by the radiator that didn't quite work. There was a vase with plastic flowers on the windowsill, a card that read, "Welcome, Helen." No signature. No smiley face. I sat on the edge of the bed in my Sunday coat, still buttoned up, still holding my purse, still waiting for someone to say this was all a mistake. But no one did. That was the moment. The click. The shift from disappointment to understanding. I had been left behind. They didn't say the words, but their absence screamed louder than anything they could have written in a birthday card. It was supposed to be a day of celebration. I was turning 68. Old enough to have raised a man, too young to be discarded. Dinner was served at 5:30. Turkey loaf, canned peas, and something that looked like peach cobbler, but tasted like glue. The woman across from me was named Mabel. She asked me 3 times where my husband was. I told her 3 different answers. After dinner, I went back to my room and closed the door quietly. There was no key, just a sliding latch. They said it was for safety. The bed creaked as I sat down. I opened the drawer beside me and started organizing the few things I was allowed to bring. Some old letters, a pair of reading glasses, my favorite pen, and then, tucked inside a folded envelope, I saw it. The lottery ticket. I had bought it the week before, on a whim, at the gas station down the road from my apartment. The clerk smiled and said, "Good luck, ma'am," like he did every Thursday. I almost threw it away. Almost. But something told me to keep it. At the time, I thought maybe it was just routine. Something I did to feel like I was still part of the world, still in the game. Now, in that tiny room with its faded wallpaper and scent of antiseptic, it felt like something else. A lifeline. Still, I didn't look at the numbers. Not yet. Not that night. Instead, I lay down in bed and stared at the ceiling. And cried. Not sobs. Not the kind of crying you hear, but the slow, leaking kind that just happens. The kind that feels older than your bones. I cried for the life I gave away. For the calls that stopped. For the casseroles left untouched. For the porch swing Ethan promised, but never bought. But mostly, I cried for the moment I realized I wasn't lost. I had been thrown away. The next morning, I asked the nurse for a newspaper. She looked surprised. "Not many residents read the news," she said. I smiled. I'm not most residents. It took her an hour to find one, but she did, and I thanked her with the kind of sincerity that makes people uncomfortable. I unfolded the page. My hands trembled, not because I was nervous, but because they always did in the morning. I read the numbers. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I folded the page slowly and slid it back into the drawer. No smile. No gasp. No jumping out of my seat. Just a long breath. I had won. $3 million. No cameras. No confetti. Just me. Alone in a room where they thought I didn't belong anymore. And that's when it clicked. They didn't want me? Fine. But I wasn't going to disappear. I wasn't going to fade into bingo nights and pudding cups. Not anymore. I called a lawyer the next day, from the landline at the front desk. I gave him the numbers, the claim slip, and clear instructions. Keep it quiet. For now. He didn't ask why. Smart man. I opened a new account, under a different name. I had it all transferred, every cent. And then I waited. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it just needs to breathe. To settle. To unfold like a slow, certain storm. A week passed. I didn't tell a soul. Not even Mabel, who had finally stopped asking where my husband was and started calling me the quiet one. They thought I was settling in. They thought I was adjusting. They thought the tears had passed. But what they didn't know was that the woman in room 214 had just bought the keys to her own future, and she was planning her next move, down to the last silent surgical step. It was late. Rain tapped on the windows of room 214, like a memory trying to be remembered. The hallway light blinked just outside my door. Soft, yellow, tired. I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavier than usual. So I sat up, pulled open the drawer beside my bed, looking for an old envelope I used to jot down grocery lists. Instead, I found it folded, thin, familiar. The lottery ticket. I had tucked it there the day I arrived, barely thinking about it. $1 spent. One small ritual that made me feel like I was still part of the world. It was dated 2 days before Ethan dropped me off. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Then, on a whim, I walked to the small recreation room where they kept yesterday's newspapers. Under the flickering light, I unfolded the ticket and checked the numbers. Twice. Then a third time. My knees felt weak, not from age, from something else. Recognition. Disbelief. I sat down. The ticket trembled between my fingers. $3 million. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled. A quiet smile, the kind you wear when the universe finally whispers back. I saw what they did. The next morning, I called Mr. Sandler, an old friend of my late husband and a man I trusted. I gave him the numbers, told him to confirm, and asked him one thing. Don't tell a soul, not even me. Just do what needs to be done. By the end of the week, the winnings were secured. Taxed, protected, and invisible to everyone but us. Now with the world thinking I was forgotten, I had power again. Quiet, invisible power. That changed everything. Because while they thought I was adjusting to bingo and bland casseroles, I was planning. Each morning, I made my bed with precision. Each night, I wrote in a small notebook I kept tucked inside a hollow book on the shelf. Something I picked up from a mystery novel long ago. I began listing everything I needed to do. Lawyer, bank, property searches, mail redirection, identity protection. There's a kind of magic in quiet preparation. It's like knitting a net no one knows they'll fall into. One morning, I asked to speak to the director of the home. He seemed nervous, like I might complain about the peas. Instead, I smiled and asked him for a printed copy of their exit protocol. Just out of curiosity, I said. He blinked, but nodded. I read it that night twice. Turns out, leaving was easier than they thought, especially if you had a signed release and an address. So I got to work. With the help of Mr. Sandler, I purchased a small but charming cottage outside town. All cash, no loans, in a trust name they'd never recognize. Then came the harder part, removing myself from their systems. Bank accounts, closed. Emergency contacts, erased. Power of attorney, revoked, quietly, legally, completely. I filed everything with notarized precision. No drama, no noise. Just tidy little moves on a board they didn't even realize existed. Then I left. It was a Thursday morning. Mabel was dozing in her chair. The nurse was humming something soft in the hallway. I signed my own release form, handed it to the director, and walked out the door with a small suitcase and my coat pressed flat. No party, no fuss, no goodbyes, just peace. The cottage was warm. Sunlight filtered through white curtains. The air smelled like cedar and lemon oil. It felt like freedom. I slept the first night with the windows open, letting the wind remind me I was still alive, still here, still Helen. Over the next week, I began rebuilding. Not just the paperwork, but myself. I planted herbs in ceramic pots on the sill. I made coffee in the mornings, strong and bitter, just how I liked it before I tried to fit into their world of almond milk and expectations. I played vinyl records, Billie Holiday, Sinatra, Ella. I was not just surviving, I was returning. But there was one final detail, something personal, something that would let me close the loop. You see, Ethan and Claire had no idea where I was. They didn't check in. They didn't call the nursing home. They didn't even ask about the lawyer I had long ago introduced them to. But they did keep using the emergency card I'd left in their drawer, the one that connected to my old account, which now, of course, was closed. So when their rent payment bounced, their car lease hiccuped, and their travel credit froze mid-airport, Claire called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Hey, Helen, we think there's been a mix-up with the bank. Can you give us a call? I didn't. 3 days later, Ethan called. His voice was tight. Mom, can you let us know what's going on? We're kind of in a situation here. That's when I knew the plan had landed. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't just about disappearing. It was about choosing, finally, where my life began again. You'd be surprised how much you can accomplish when no one sees you coming. After the letter, I gave them silence. Not as punishment, but as clarity. A line in the sand they didn't know they'd crossed until it was far behind them. But I wasn't finished. I didn't just want distance. I wanted resolution. You see, For years, I'd been funding more than just love. I had quietly co-signed their first mortgage, helped them pay off a credit card after Claire's boutique went under, even floated them $6,000 when Ethan lost his job during the merger. Always with a smile, always with, "Don't worry, sweetheart. That's what moms are for. No more." With Mr. Sandler's help, I began a careful review of every document that still had my name. Utilities? Removed. Insurance policies? Updated. Education fund I'd been contributing to for a grandchild I hadn't even met yet? Liquidated. And then, something unexpected. While reviewing one of the shared accounts, my lawyer found a series of quiet withdrawals. Small but frequent. Made from my side of the joint retirement fund. Claire's name was on them. Ethan had given her access, without telling me, without even asking. A few hundred here. 1,000 there, marked miscellaneous support. Mr. Sandler asked if I wanted to pursue it. I said yes, but not through court. I had something better in mind. It started with a dinner party. Not theirs, mine. I invited 3 guests, old friends from my nursing days, women I hadn't seen in years, but who remembered everything. I told them my story, not as gossip, but as warning. And then I told them this. I'm starting something. A small grant fund for women over 60 who've been financially taken advantage of by their own families. They stared at me. Then they cried. Then they volunteered. Within a month, we had a board. We called it Second Bloom. And within 6 weeks, we had our first batch of anonymous applications. Women who had given everything to their children, only to be left with nothing. One had signed over her house. Another had cashed out her 401k to help her son-in-law's startup. Another had moved in with her daughter and was sleeping in a garage while the grandkids took her old bedroom. I funded all 3, quietly, anonymously, through the very money Claire had once withdrawn for miscellaneous needs. But still, that wasn't the end of it. I hadn't spoken to Ethan in over 2 months. Until one morning, I got a letter. Handwritten. Messy. "Mom, I don't know what to say anymore. Claire's upset. We're behind on bills. I lost my job last week and we might have to sell the condo. I know I haven't been the son you deserve, but please, can we talk?" I read it 3 times, folded it gently, placed it in the back of my drawer, and I didn't reply. Instead, I made a different call. To the landlord. You see, the condo Ethan and Claire lived in technically belonged to me. When Ethan was 29 and couldn't get approved for a loan, I bought the unit and let them rent it from me, though I'd never once cashed a rent check. They never knew the title remained in my name. Now they would. I had the property appraised, not out of cruelty, but to reclaim what was mine. The market was strong. A young couple was interested. They just had their first child, and they wanted to raise her in a home built on honesty, so I sold it. I gave Ethan 30 days' notice. Certified mail. Tracking number. No loopholes. Claire emailed me. "This feels cruel. Helen, we're family." I didn't respond. I used part of the proceeds to triple the fund's size. And the rest? I put into a trust. For myself. Travel. Health. And tea. I took a trip to Maine. Saw the ocean for the first time in 15 years. Bought a painting from a street artist that reminded me of myself. Worn edges, bright center. And slowly, the weight started to lift. Not all at once, but piece by piece. There's something sacred about reclaiming your life, especially when no one thought you would. And Ethan, he moved into a rental 2 towns over. Tried starting over. I heard he took up carpentry. Good. Working with your hands has a way of humbling the heart. As for me, I've never felt lighter. I walk every morning before sunrise. I host Sunday dinners for women like me, who've learned that silence is not the same as peace. And this each time someone says, "I wish I had your strength," I smile and say, "You do. You just have to be pushed hard enough to find it." But this story isn't done. Not yet. Because while I thought I'd made my final move, life had one more twist in store. And it arrived, in the form of a wedding invitation I never expected to receive. It came on a Tuesday. A thick white envelope slid into my mailbox, hand addressed in familiar handwriting. I hadn't seen it in years. Still the same loop on the H, the same slightly slanted N. Ethan! Inside, a wedding invitation. Claire's sister was getting married. And apparently, I was invited. My first instinct was confusion, then caution, then curiosity. Not a phone call, not a letter asking to reconnect, but a glossy card with a peony print and calligraphy that said, "Helen Carter, you are cordially invited." Cordially, as if we'd all forgotten the last 3 months. As if silence, eviction, and betrayal could be polished up with matching fonts and pastel envelopes. I set the card on my kitchen table and stared at it while my tea steeped. I knew it wasn't just a gesture. It was bait. Claire never did anything without a plan. She wanted to be seen as the gracious one, the forgiver, the peacemaker. Inviting me was strategy, not sentiment. I could have declined. I could have ignored it. But then I remembered something my grandmother used to say. You don't always win by staying home. Sometimes you need to walk into the room and let them see what surviving looks like. So I RSVP'd yes, +0. I bought a dress, navy blue, elegant, simple, with sleeves, not to hide, but to remind myself that softness can also be armor. I arrived 10 minutes before the ceremony. Not too early, not too late. The venue was beautiful, high ceilings, string quartet, champagne in long flutes. No one noticed me at first, which suited me, until Claire's mother spotted me from across the room and whispered into someone's ear. And just like that, the ripples began. I didn't flinch. I walked to my seat, nodded politely, and sat alone. The ceremony was sweet, staged, overly long. Vows about transparency and trust. Claire teared up, so did her sister. But Ethan kept looking over. Not glaring, not pleading, just waiting. At the reception, I was assigned a table near the back, right next to the coat rack. They gave me chicken when I'd checked fish. No one made room for my chair. My name card was spelled wrong. Classic Claire. Still, I sat with dignity. I smiled at the waiter. I took one sip of wine and let it sit untouched the rest of the night. And then, just before the first dance, Ethan came over. "Can we talk?" I looked at my watch. "I've got 6 minutes before dessert. Make it quick." He sat, nervous, hair thinner than I remembered, eyes softer. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I said nothing. I didn't know what Claire was doing with the accounts. I wasn't paying attention. I should have been. Still nothing. He kept going. "I've been seeing a counselor, working through stuff. I realize how much I leaned on you without thinking about what it cost you." A pause. "I want to fix things." I looked at him, really looked. There was a boy in there somewhere. But the man had done damage, and it wasn't mine to clean up anymore. "Fixing things," I said slowly, "starts with understanding what you broke." He nodded. "I'm learning." I leaned in, voice low. "Good. Learn quickly." He blinked. "I mean it." I continued. "Because the next woman you disappoint might not forgive you just because you share DNA." He swallowed hard. Claire approached. Fake smile, stiff spine. "Hi, Helen," she chirped. I turned to her. "Claire." She glanced at Ethan, then back at me. "We're glad you came." "I'm sure you are." Pause. "Just so you know," she added. "We're doing better now." "A fresh start. Lovely," I said. "Make sure this one comes with boundaries and receipts." And with that, I excused myself. No outburst, no tears, no scene, just grace. I stepped outside into the night air, heels clicking lightly against the stone. There was a bench beneath a string of lights. I sat, exhaled. Then, from behind me, soft footsteps. It was Ethan. He stood beside the bench, unsure. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I know. I wanted you to know I see it now. All of it. Everything you did. Everything I missed. I didn't cry. Didn't soften. But I did nod. Once. I'm not angry anymore." I said, "But I'm not coming back." He looked down. I figured. "But if you ever become the man I raised, not the man who forgot me, maybe one day, you'll earn your way to my porch." He looked up, eyes wet. "I'd like that." I stood, smoothed my dress. "You've got work to do." "I know." "Then get started." And I walked to my car. Not victorious, not vindicated, but free. And sometimes, that's the real ending. But in my case, it was just the beginning of something else. Because the next morning, I got a phone call From a reporter. Apparently, Second Bloom had helped more women than I thought, and someone wanted to tell that story on a national stage. The reporter's name was Lisa. She found me through a blog post, written anonymously by one of the women. Second Bloom had helped. Apparently, her daughter had forced her to sign over her home. After we paid for her legal fees and moved her into safe housing, she wrote, "There's a woman who saved me. She goes by H.R. Carter. She taught me how to stand up without screaming." Lisa tracked me down. "I'm doing a feature on financial abuse in elder care," she said. "Someone mentioned your name, and then 5 more did. Would you be open to speaking?" I hesitated, not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in a long while, I had peace, and peace is expensive. I wasn't sure I wanted to spend it, but then she said something that changed everything. "We want to highlight solutions, not just pain. We want people to see that this can end well, because of women like you." So I agreed, on one condition. My name can be public, but not my past. She respected that. We met at a cafe halfway between her studio and my cottage. She wore tortoiseshell glasses and asked permission before recording. She was good, smart, sharp, but warm, like someone who'd been raised by strong women and never forgot it. She asked me about the beginning, about the mission, about how I decided to create the fund. I told her about the folded lottery ticket, about the room I didn't choose, about the silence that taught me how to speak again. She nodded, typed, occasionally wiped her eyes behind her laptop. When the story aired, it was quiet at first, a 5-minute segment buried in the last third of a Sunday news show. But then it spread. Clips were shared on social media. A podcaster picked it up. An advocacy group reposted it. Within a week, my email inbox was flooded. Messages from women, men, adult children, even 2 nurses from the old facility. "Thank you. How can I help? You gave me language I didn't have before." Donations started coming in. We created a GoFundMe to manage the overflow. By week 2, it passed $100,000. By week 3, a corporate sponsor reached out. A financial firm, run by women. They offered to match every dollar. I accepted, cautiously. But something else happened too. Something Ethan couldn't have prepared for. His company, his new employer, saw the story. And someone in HR put 2 and 2 together. Apparently, Ethan had listed Second Bloom on his resume. Claimed he helped launch the initiative. A total lie. When the news hit, Lisa called me again. "Do you want to comment?" I paused, then said simply, "No, but I'll send a copy of the original bank withdrawal logs to his employer, if they ask." They did, and I did. A week later, Ethan was let go. No lawsuit, no drama, just a polite thank you and goodbye email from HR. Claire called. I let it ring. She emailed. I didn't open it. Instead, I posted something simple on Second Bloom's page. "This isn't revenge. It's redirection. You don't get to steal from women and rewrite their stories. Not anymore." The post went viral. Even the mayor of our small town reached out. Asked if I'd consider sitting on the board for the new Office of Elder Protection. I said I'd think about it. But something deeper shifted in me then. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving betrayal. I was shaping what came after it. And with that came power. Not loud, not flashy, but rooted. One day, while grocery shopping, a woman stopped me in the canned beans aisle. "You're her, aren't you?" she whispered. I smiled. "Depends who you mean." The woman with the violet, the letter, the fund. I nodded. She blinked back tears. "My sister's going through it." I showed her your story. She finally left. I touched her shoulder. She didn't need me. She just needed permission. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about Ethan anymore, or Claire, or the condo. This was about every woman who gave too much and got too little, who stayed quiet too long and thought that was strength. I went home and opened the old drawer where I'd kept the lottery ticket. It wasn't there anymore. I had burned it weeks ago. But inside the drawer was something else now, a folder, filled with stories. Printed out, handwritten, emailed. Testimonies from women I'd never met but somehow already loved. I added one more page to the file, typed it slowly. I thought I was alone. I thought my story ended in silence. But I was wrong. My story was the spark. And now the whole forest is lit with women who finally see themselves. There was no twist left to play, no final strike to deliver, just one more quiet revolution. The next day, I bought 20 violet plants from the nursery, delivered them to every woman in the Second Bloom network, one by one. Some lived in shelters, some lived in homes they finally owned again. Some just cried on the doorstep and said, "I didn't think anyone saw me, but I did, and I always will." Some endings don't feel like fireworks. They feel like exhaling after holding your breath for years. That was me. No victory parade, no applause, just a quiet kitchen, a hot cup of tea, and the kind of stillness that hums with peace. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to Ethan, not to Claire, not to the town, not even to myself. I had already done the impossible, not by fighting back, but by choosing myself. It had taken decades. Decades of being the bigger person, of swallowing discomfort, of mistaking silence for strength and sacrifice for love. But here, in this season of my life, I had rewritten the script. I woke up each morning with no one waiting on me. And that, oddly, was a blessing. No tasks, no guilt, just choice. And for the first time in a long time, I had energy. Not adrenaline, but joy. I started baking again. Pies, mostly. I found an old peach cobbler recipe in my grandmother's cookbook. The kind with real butter and unapologetic sugar. I dropped slices off at neighbors' doors with little notes that said, "From one woman who made it through to another." I began writing too. Not a memoir, just moments. Little vignettes of things that had almost broken me, but didn't. I wrote about the cold tile under my feet that first night in the nursing home. About the smell of Ethan's baby shampoo. About the sting in my chest when Claire called me excess. I wrote it all. And then I let it go. I didn't need revenge anymore, because I had something sweeter. Legacy. Second Bloom had grown beyond anything I imagined. We had a team now. Volunteers. Social workers. Even a retired judge who offered free legal clinics twice a month. We partnered with 3 shelters and launched a monthly freedom fund to help women pay deposits for new homes. We didn't just give money. We gave options. And with options came power. One day, a woman named Rosa came to one of our meetings. She was quiet, eyes tired, shoulders low. She listened to others speak, but didn't share. Until we were cleaning up, she touched my arm gently and said, "I didn't say anything tonight, but I wanted to. I watched your interview. You reminded me that I'm still here, that surviving is its own kind of resistance." I hugged her. Not the quick kind, the kind that says, "You don't need to explain. I already know." And I did, because I had been her, and I'd found my way through. So now I light the path for others. That's the part no one tells you about healing. It's not neat. It doesn't happen in a straight line. It's messy, slow, non-linear. But when you get there, it feels like coming home to yourself. Some days I still think about Ethan, not with bitterness, but with a soft ache, like pressing on a bruise you've almost forgotten. I don't know if he'll ever change. That's not mine to control. But I hope he remembers the boy who brought violets to his mother on rainy afternoons. And maybe, just maybe, he'll grow into the man that boy would have been proud of. As for me, I have a garden now. Violets, of course. And rosemary. And sunflowers that tilt toward the light even on cloudy days. I sit out there in the mornings, wrapped in a shawl, notebook in my lap, tea in hand. The wind doesn't chill me like it used to. It reminds me I'm alive. And in the stillness, I sometimes hear the voice of the woman I used to be. Tired, scared, unsure. She thanks me for not giving up on her. And I smile, because I didn't. So if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt discarded, overlooked, replaced, I want you to hear me now. You are not invisible. You are not weak. And you are certainly not done. You are a whole story. One that hasn't finished telling itself yet. And maybe, just maybe, this is your first page back, if you've been through something like this. Or you know someone who has. Share this story. Because silence protects the wrong people. But truth rebuilds. Leave a comment if you've ever had to reclaim your life piece by piece. Or just write, "I made it." That's all. Just 3 words. But I promise, someone out there is waiting to read them. And know they're not alone. And if you're that someone, You are seen, you are held, and you are stronger than the people who let you go.